Lately, I've been getting some inspirations for videos that come in pairs, where you need information from one sermon in order to better appreciate what I'm saying in the other, and vice versa. Now, today I'm going to try to combine two such sermons and see what happens. The two sermons I'm talking about are something like this. In one, which I would call biblical proportions, I would elaborate on a popular phrase. You may have heard it, where someone talks about an event or some other thing being of biblical proportions. It can be applied to things like great disasters, whether natural or otherwise. But it can also be applied to incredible miracles, especially ones that are witnessed by many people. A miracle of biblical proportions. The idea I would be trying to challenge in such a sermon is the popular notion that the Bible itself is more or less a fairy tale. And because of this, life as we know it is never going to match the Bible in significance. If anything big is going to happen, it will mostly depend on exaggerating some rather mundane things that we experience in our lives. Now that's the first sermon. The second one, the one I've chosen as the title for this combined sermon, is one I would call God Has a Plan. Now the reason I need the first sermon is because I've heard the title of this second sermon used in what I think is the wrong way. It's usually drawn out a bit more to God has a plan for your life. And I have a very specific reason for cutting off those last three words. It's because this more churchy title, A Plan for Your Life, puts the emphasis on you. And so people easily start thinking, oh, so that's why I'm in this job. It's all part of God's plan. Or, well, that's why I'm engaged to this person, because together we're going to do something great for God. Or, well, that's why I'm living in and possibly owning this house in this town. God is going to bring someone special here to sleep in the guest room one day. Or it's going to be used for Bible studies every Wednesday night or church socials on the weekend. In other words, the churchy vision of God's plan is a so-called ministry that is tailor-made for your plan, the way that you have chosen to live your life, right where you are now, with minimal change. No one wants to come right out and say it, but the so-called ministry that comes out of this picture of God's plan is not the kind of thing you read about in the Bible. Like, where does the Bible say that the various ministries in the church include anointed cake decorators? Or where does the Bible talk about someone having a gift for making Christian video games? Or maybe just that God has called you to be a Christian celebrity, a basketball star, or maybe just a coach for the local church basketball team. You see what I mean? Our vision is definitely not one with biblical proportions. It happens because all the emphasis is on trying to piece together a ministry that is custom-made for you and your needs, your interests, your friends, your skills, and your possessions. Consequently, you get something that just never happened in the Bible. I mean, yeah, sure, there were people who built roads and people who settled legal disputes and people who raised and sold chickens, but they're not the subject of the Bible. We have this tendency to create a God in our own image, a God who revolves around ourselves. Consequently, God's plan, the real plan, the big plan, gets overlooked. In other words, the exact opposite happens to what really needs to happen. We need to find God's plan, but instead we put all the focus on our plan, with just minor adjustments. My biblical proportions sermon would aim to get us out of that kind of thinking. It would tell us that the plan that weaves through the Bible is continuing to unfold right here and now. God's plan is just as big as it ever was. When he spared Noah from the flood, when he spared Lot from Sodom, it's as big as when Jesus fed the multitudes, and as big as what happened on the day of Pentecost. I believe this is true, and all those people trying to keep you satisfied with a lesser vision may be cheating you out of something that's going to count for eternity. The problem is that we stopped relating to the God of the Bible, and we invented this pitifully effeminate replica of Jesus that revolves around church meetings and Sunday school classes. Have you ever heard the term Sunday school picnic? When something is big or important, we might say, this isn't going to be a Sunday school picnic. Or when we want to emphasize that something's really blah, we say it's about as exciting as a Sunday school picnic. The term is used sarcastically to put something down as pretty blah. Loving kids and teaching them about God is fine, except that both the love and the God being referred to in Sunday school picnics rarely ever reaches biblical proportions. It's shallow, lukewarm, insipid. Now I want to look at why this is happening. I'm saying that we can change it all. So let's hear how to do it. I'm fully convinced that the reason we have not discovered God's plan of biblical proportions, and the reason that it is so hard to compare what is happening in the church world today with what is written in the Bible, here it comes, is because we have never been prepared to obey in biblical proportions. Plenty of people want miracles, like the ones we read about in the Bible. But we don't want the kind of faithfulness that preceded all those incredible events that we read about. So by deleting or covering up all the unpleasant bits of the Bible, we have shoved together, at least in our memories, only the miracles. Then we assume that miracle after miracle after miracle represents a true picture of God's interactions with the human race throughout history. And if we don't have that, well, then we haven't got God. Think about the Exodus from Egypt. After all of those incredible plagues that Moses brought down on Pharaoh. Then it was followed by the parting of the Red Sea, which helped the children of Israel to complete their escape. Now that's something we would definitely think of as a miracle of biblical proportions, isn't it? In fact, when Cecil B. DeMille managed to use special effects to create such an event in his epic movie, The Ten Commandments, even that scene from the movie became something for people to remember and talk about for many years. Much like we do when we're talking about the first man to walk on the moon. But look at this. If you want to get the bigger picture, think about the Jews today. They still continue to remember that one miracle even now. And they do it through a religious ceremony called the Passover. They've been remembering it for literally thousands of years. Why? Well, because it only happened once. Such miracles do not happen every day, especially not if we never put or find ourselves in the kind of life and death situations which the Exodus was all about. Now please pay close attention here, because I'm not trying to take the miracles out of the Bible or take them out of our lives today. In fact, I'm really trying to put them back in, but I want real miracles. And to do that, we need to get the full picture and study the reality that surrounded them. I have mentioned obedience of biblical proportions, but there are also disappointments of biblical proportions. Consider this. Every one of those people who walked through the Red Sea on dry land, all of them ended up dying out there in the desert, totally lost and unable to find their way out. That included Moses as well. Do we really want to be a part of that? How often do we remember the glamour and the glory, but we totally miss the underlying lessons that should have been learned from such great events in history and from the great events in our lives? Write this down. Memorize it. Burn it into your heart. Miracles of biblical proportions come from obedience of biblical proportions. At the same time that in themselves the miracles do little to keep people faithful. We will always be wishing we had more. Today's church has thrown obedience to Jesus out the window. And yet people are surprised when all the talk about miracles turns out to be exaggerations. Lying signs and wonders. Dry wells, empty clouds, false hopes. Instead of a Bible-sized Jesus, we have only toy Jesuses being offered. Miniatures that cannot speak, that shut up and stay in the toy box to be pulled out and strutted around only when it suits us. Where can we find a Jesus who can make the demands that the real Jesus made on his followers? I personally feel that what we are saying here on this channel is eternally significant. And it's different, it's special, it's unique. That is, I believe what we're saying is something that will be remembered throughout history, even if we're already at the tail end of history as we know it. Put what God is really doing today up against Creflo Dollar's $7 million jet. Put it up against Joel Osteen's mega church building. Hey, even put it up against Francis Chan's millions of dollars of fundraising. I honestly don't think there's going to be all that much mention in the corridors of heaven for such programs. Why? Well, because they all revolve around the guys who are organizing them. They all turn into personality cults. What the world needs is something that revolves around Jesus. When that starts happening, that's when you'll get something of truly biblical proportions. Something that will be remembered in heaven throughout eternity. Something on a par with the Exodus, or even on a par with the day of Pentecost. Now that's what I'm looking for. I'm confident it's only going to happen through obedience. Obedience in biblical proportions. So now, back to God's plan. Can you see how a sermon about God's plan that even hints at him having to use everything that you've been doing all your life is still self-centered? And can you see that what God really wants is precisely opposite to that? See, God has his own plan, an eternal one. But he needs an army of believers who will drop everything else, all their plans, right now, in order to become a part of it. Well, God even asked Abraham to sacrifice yesterday's plan. A plan that Abraham knew with all his heart had come from God. God said to Abraham, now it's time to let go of it. Stop telling me what I can and I cannot do. If I want to change my mind, then let me. And it was precisely because Abraham was willing to even go that far, to be flexible, to be pliable and usable for God, that he became the father of the faithful throughout all generations. God is calling on believers everywhere to forsake it all. Our jobs, our possessions, our families, our institutional churches, and all the lesser ministries, and start following Jesus. To death, if need be. Jesus basically said that to the multitudes near the end of the 14th chapter of Luke. He said, if you're not prepared to let go of everything, even your very life, then whatever you build, it's not, do you hear me? It's not going to be my plan. It's going to be your plan. Oh, you'll include mention of God along the way, but it will only be a God of your own creation, behaving on your terms. God slotting into your justifications and your explanations and your rationalizations. And quite honestly, no matter how clever you are with words, God is not going to fall for that. He has a plan, and it does not need your plan any more than it needs other gods. There are too many managers trying to tell God how to do his job. Christians everywhere are living in a delusional world where God jumps every time you shout. We make the plan and then we call it God's plan and think that makes it so. So, am I guilty of the same thing? Maybe. And if I am, may God curse me and get me back on track. What we need is not going to revolve around me or around this channel. I believe that there are others who are hearing the same things that I'm hearing when I open my Bible to the four Gospels. And I believe that God will eventually, in his own way, bring us all together in his time and according to his plan. This bigger plan, this plan of biblical proportions, is what I'm looking for. A worldwide church of true believers who are being prepared like a bride for her husband. What I see in the church world today is not a bride. I see a whore, selfishly obsessed with herself. The bride of Christ, without spot or wrinkle, will be the only one for whom Jesus returns. I want to be a part of that, more than anything else in the world. Self-recognition is not a requirement. The more I can stay hidden, the better. Let us all lose our identity so that Christ can be lifted up as our wonderful husband. Remember, a whore directs all the attention at herself, but a bride will want everyone to look at her husband. Anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Nothing over the top emotional about this, just a need for us to raise our expectations up to biblical proportions at the same time that we prepare for something that could cost us our lives. Even what we have now may totally collapse tomorrow, and it won't stop God from carrying out His plan. Like Abraham, let us not hold so tightly to what God showed us yesterday that we refuse to sacrifice even that revelation or experience for something better when God says, "Let Isaac die. I have something else." Amen? Amen.